Greetings and salutations, Afrolytes. It is I, AfroMandias, back with another video with y'all today. Yes, it has been a minute. I know that he said that I'm going to start uploading a little more consistently, and I'm keeping my word on it. It's just that things have been busy. Life has just been going on, and, I just haven't had the time to kind of sit down and just kind of do this kind of stuff with y'all. But I now have the time. I'm gonna, stick with me. Again, this is a process that we're all trying to get through with this and whatnot. And I'm still praying that one of these days, one of my videos are gonna end up on TikTok with some annoying influencer being like, "Oh look, check out this Afro kid in his universe and whatnot." I pray for that, but I know that this is going to be a process, but my thing is that, with your all guys' continued support and my father's continued support is kind of motivating me to continue with this kind of stuff. So I now have the time, and today I'm going to be talking about part 4. And now I can already hear you guys saying, Afro, hold up a second. I thought you said that you only had 3 universes. Baby, I have more universes than you can ever possibly imagine. I have the Chronicle universe, I have the Legend universe, and I have the D.A.D universe, and I have this other universe that's going to be coming up. I don't have the name of it yet, but just stick around. I'm going to have pictures of it posted on my story, on my Insta, so stick around for that. But, part 1 was only my introduction, part 2 was the introduction to my Chronicle universe, and part 3 was my introduction to the Legend universe. And to this, to right now, my part 3 is probably the longest video that I have so far, spanning to almost an hour. So, the thing is that, I can definitely tell y'all for a fact that, part 4 is going to be a lot longer as well, because I'm going to try to, again, I'm not going to explain everything, but I'm going to explain what the cosmology of it is and what characters reside in there. Again, I'm not going to tell the entire story. I may, because I have, there's a character in there that is a little more development compared to everything else I've done, just because, honestly, other than Cinderella Man, he was one of my personal favorite characters to write, because just of how much there's an emotional connection to it. I'm gonna get to him when I get to him, but for right now, I just want to say thank you to all those who are subscribed to me and to this channel. It's still kind of small right now, and I'm okay with that. I don't expect to see thousands upon thousands of views, but with the moral support of my father backing me up, and you guys watching my videos, I know you guys are watching my videos, but don't be afraid to be a stranger, all right? Go down there, leave a comment, say hey, Afro, this is pretty good, but I feel like this could be expanded upon. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that into consideration. I'll think about it. And if you guys get the chance, again, don't want to sound like I'm e-begging, but try to see if you can send this to a friend or a coworker or whatnot. Anything counts. Anything counts. I'm sorry, there's a piece of hair. I wonder where that came from. Huh. There's hair on my phone. I wonder where that came from. Anywho, so yes, today is part 4. Part 4. Holy cow. I know. It's incredible, isn't it? How far we came talking about, how I started from all this and how I'm ending up here now. It's really nice because, in the back of my head, I always like the idea of having the big 3, you know what I'm saying? DC has the DC Trinity, Marvel has their Marvel Trinity, just something to where it fits. I don't know why, but I just like the number 3. It makes so much sense. I have 2 younger brothers, so 1, 2, 3, stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It just makes a lot more sense that, I do have another universe, but, it's not connected to any of these universes. And even this universe is kind of like a separate story and whatnot, and takes more fantasy elements to it. But, without further ado, I just want to say thank you all for those who have been watching my videos and who are my new subscribers. Thank you for your time and thank you for your patience. Again, I'm gonna try to see, I'm in school, so I'm gonna try to see if I can upload. Just try to look for uploads and updates every Wednesday and every Sunday. Those are usually the days where I can sit down and just say, Wednesday's a hump day, it's the middle of the week. People are kind of, trying to push through it and whatnot. But I just want to say thank you all so much for your time and patience. And this video is also going to be a longer one. So, grab yourself a couple of snacks, grab yourself some celery, make yourself some ants on a log, grab yourself some nice orange juice, and just let Papa Afro explain his nonsense to you, all right? So today we are going to be talking about the D.A.D universe. And if you know how to spell, past the third grade, that spells dad. I know that spells dad, and I know that's kind of weird, but D.A.D essentially stands for demons and deities. That's right. I kind of took a book out of the nerd, handbook and saying like Dungeons and Dragons, and I like that. I wanted to do my own thing, so I decided to go with D.A.D instead of D&D because I know that Wizards of the Coast would throw a cease and desist at me, so I decided to make my own demons and deities. And it makes sense because we're gonna meet some demons and we're gonna meet some deities. Not exactly the ones that you're thinking, but just be patient with me, and I'm gonna explain as much as I can to you all. Again, this isn't gonna go over everything that happens in the D.A.D universe. Again, this is all just the three main head points that are going to be focused on these stories and whatnot. Like my other two universes, there are three stories that make it up. My Chronicle universe, there's World President, Jack Flowers, Bad Company, and Jailbirds. In my Legend universe, there is Junito, the Alien Blade, the Rising Renegades, and Red Tatanka. So, but before we even get to any of those, let's just, let's take a step back. Let's go back to the beginning of time, the beginning to where the earth was created. Now, on this earth, it was a simple plain rock. Nothing much was going on with it. And in this universe, it's not called Earth, it's called Gaia. Again, please stick with me because this universe isn't connected to Chronicle or Legend. It's its own separate kind of universe outside of its realm. So on Gaia itself, there were these beings known as the Makers. The Makers are essentially my version of angels. They are underneath the one above, one above all is Marvel. The greatest among deities, or Gad. So in this story, people don't say God, they say Gad, or G-A-D, or greatest among deities, right? So Gad essentially, think of the Bible, but instead of God, it's Gad, right? So Gad essentially brought life onto this planet, and one of those lives was mankind. Mankind, obviously, with it being so fragile and so small, and basically they didn't really have a lot to defend themselves against the evils of what was going on Gaia. Gad himself instructed his makers to make a race of guardian beings, and the makers had no idea what to make. So, they kind of sat down and they thought to themselves, what can we do? What can protect mankind? And one of the makers came up with leatherbacks. Now, leatherbacks are essentially these giant, dark-skinned humanoid beings who have the abilities to flex their back muscles to give them special and innate abilities, right? And in this universe, we're going to meet a lot of leatherbacks. Leatherbacks are very important to the narrative because they are essentially the guardians of man and mankind. Essentially, they don't necessarily take a backseat, but they're not the main focus for the most part. Mankind essentially separates into multiple different types of mankind. There's frostborn mankind, there's Iceborne mankind, there's Beast mankind, there's Cyclops mankind. So all the creatures that you think from D&D or any kind of fantasy roll top game, they are all presented in this universe. And yes, that includes like, anthropomorphic animals as well. Those are called beastkin mankind. So essentially, fast forward a little bit, mankind is kind of, moving along and whatnot. But there's this race of beings that I have mentioned back in my part 1 and part 2 that were angry with mankind. And those are known as stars. Now, as I mentioned before, stars are these race of godlike beings that were also, essentially, they were the first creation of D.A.D, but they thought themselves better than D.A.D, and essentially D.A.D had tossed them out of their heavenly creation. Obviously, if you read the Bible, this essentially began with Lucifer. Lucifer, morning star, essentially Lucifer, morning star, was the first ever star. And essentially he is the reigner or the true star and whatnot. So D.A.D had threw morning star out and casted him out of the heavens. Then he decided and looked at D.A.D and said, I'm gonna make my own race of creators known as stars. And with blackjacks and hookers, and if you know Futurama, you know that reference. But essentially, Lucifer Morningstar is the creator of the stars, and we obviously see a lot of stars appear in both the Chronicle and the Legend universe. They are very much a very dangerous force of nature that can cause the destruction of galaxies with just a snap of their fingers, right? So essentially, stars were created to destroy man, and with the help of the Leatherbacks, they were essentially created by the makers. They had the power to rival stars. So the stars, thinking that they need more numbers for themselves, decided to make their own version of, not the guardians of man, but predators of man. So what they did is that they gathered the fallen, bones of mankind and star kind and leatherback kind. Actually, no, it was just star and man, the bestial primal version of man, and essentially they formed this coagulatory clay, and thus was born the first ever Nephilim. The Nephilim being, these giant dog-headed creatures. Nephilim also play a role in this universe as well. We're going to have a character, but I'm taking a step ahead of myself. So essentially Nephilim were created to be the top predators of mankind, and Leatherbacks were essentially created to guard man. So Leatherbacks and Nephilim kind of duke it out and whatnot. And again, Nephilim were strong, but they weren't Leatherback strong. So the stars decided to say, okay, you know what? Screw this. We're going to make another species to be a predator of man. And they made the gargoyles. The gargoyles were essentially the rulers of the sky, while, the aerial predators to kind of take on mankind. But again, their forces were just not enough to take on the Leatherbacks. So Leatherbacks were just very strong and very durable. Very durable beings. However, there was one weakness to a Leatherback, and that was a mistletoe. Now, in the logic of the makers, they assumed that everything in the world was able to hurt, their creation. So they decided to make the Leatherbacks immune to everything except for one of the most docile things, a mistletoe. And obviously, if you know Norse mythology, this is taking the story of Balder, the god of light, and I think he was considered one of the most handsome Norse gods and whatnot. His mother wouldn't necessarily say cursed him, but essentially granted her son the ability to be immune to any kind of affliction and kind of damage except for mistletoe, because she assumed that mistletoe was the most docile thing. Loki used it, bind it to an arrow and shot at him and killed him. But anywho, references aside, essentially the Leatherbacks were immune to all types of diseases and all types of, mostly, obviously you can, if you're strong enough, you can physically hurt a leatherback, obviously. They weren't like immune to all physical damage, but they were tanks. They were essentially tanks. But when the gargoyles had discovered the abilities of mistletoe, that's what dwindled down the leatherback population. The Nephilim, also seeing this, essentially teamed up with the gargoyles and essentially, you know, got into a great war between the leatherbacks and whatnot. And it got so bad that the makers above came down and essentially, you know, got rid of all, sorts of the mistletoe. Now, obviously, it didn't get rid of all of it, but it got rid of it to the point to where the leatherbacks were able to fight back and whatnot. So, Great War happened. I say that as there was another Great War back in my part one. But that essentially establishes the creatures that we're going to be seeing and that are really important to the story. Nephilim, gargoyles, and leatherbacks. Those are going to be like really, really important later on because, most stars are made up of those groups. There's not a star leatherback until much later on, but we're going to get to it when we get to it. So, continuing on to thousands of years, mankind obviously evolves to learn magic and whatnot. And as I said, they separated and departed into different types of kin, like, borns and whatnot, fireborn, iceborn, elemental borns, beastborns, skyborns, and humans with wings and whatnot. So, that's basically the story of how we're kind of where we at now on this planet. This planet is filled with magic, and essentially it is, it's because the planet Gaia is filled with this thing called mana. Now, mana is controlled by one's emotion, and one's emotions can be determined by it either being a black tide or a white tide. That is going to be very important later. But that's essentially the world building that I have so far. I'm still kind of writing on it. It's still kind of rough, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. Leatherbacks have essentially disappeared. No one knows where the leatherbacks have gone off to. Some people have said they've gone extinct. Others have said that they are just nomads wandering the planet, trying to look for a home or look for a purpose to, continue, because mankind has grown so much that they didn't necessarily need the leatherbacks' help. So the leatherbacks essentially are kind of MIA at the moment. So are Nephilim. I say that, but Nephilim are actually extinct. We're going to get to it when we get to it. And so are gargoyles. We are also going to get to that when we get to that. So leatherbacks are MIA. Nephilim are mostly extinct, and gargoyles are mostly extinct, right? So that's kind of where we at so far. We're on Gaia. Gaia is controlled by mana. There is, different types of mana and magic and whatnot controlled by the different types of magic-born humans. So, skipping forward through a little bit, let's talk about the stars. Okay, the stars are probably one of the most important aspects to all my stories because they are essentially what the peak level of power can be in my universe. Stars are essentially, as I mentioned before, are these godlike beings that have the abilities of whatever you can think of, they can do it, right? And just because they're powerful doesn't mean that they can't die. They can age, but they can't naturally die of old age. You would have to kill a star. A star can't really die by natural means. You can't really poison a star. You can't really, you can kill a star, but you yourself would have to mostly be a star in order to kill a star or something akin to it, right? So, as I mentioned before, stars are just these pinnacle of these powerful beings that reign over and terrorize, the people of Gaia. And of course, I mentioned in my last parts, they also terrorize and, essentially spread their influences in other universes and whatnot. And they are just these nasty, nasty beings who just want to see nothing but destruction. And even then, like, some stars have their own motives of what they want to do. Some stars want to collect, some stars want to destroy, some stars just want to mess around and just have fun. You know, stars are essentially the gods of my universe and whatnot, right? So let's talk about some stars. Let's talk about the main three stars that we're going to be focusing on and are technically the main antagonists of this universe, at least for the most part. It's not just them, but there is also a group called the Star Pack. I'm going to get to them in a little bit. But let's talk about the three judges. The three judges being Lyra, Balrog, and Samael. Balrog, Balrog being the oldest of the three siblings, Samael being the youngest, and Lyra being the third born, or the second born, the middle child, and whatnot, right? So essentially, they were born from Rhea and Cronus. Cronus and Rhea both being gargoyle stars. Cronus overthrowing his father Typhonus, Typhonus, and essentially he was the reigning king. But then Balrog saw how poorly he was managing his, the star crew essentially. So he and his brother and his sister got together and went and overthrew him. And Samael didn't really want to kill his mom. He was a mama's boy and whatnot, but they killed her anyways as well to kind of, completely get rid of the old and bring in the new. So they are considered the three judges. Balrog, the oldest, is considered the judge of knowledge and the judge of, collecting information. And essentially he stocks a library of different types of books and literature and stuff like that. He collects information throughout different types of universes. Lyra, the middle child, is the god, see, there you go, is the judge of balance and order. She is technically the one who designed them. Instead of being kings, they would rather be judges to try to find more stars, and she is the one who essentially pushed forward, those who are worthy of stars, they can become one and whatnot, right? So she is kind of the, one who established, instead of being kings, let's just be judges, right? So then there's Samael. Samael is the judge of war and conflict and strategy. Obviously, you can tell by that, he likes to cause fights. He likes to destroy, and he likes to do whatever it means to just throw a punch. That's Samael for you. He's going to be a lot more important later on as well. So those are the three stars. And of course, we're going to meet a lot more stars later on, especially when the event of the extreme days comes. I'm going to explain that later on in this video, but just keep those three in mind. So let's see. I talked about the stars. I'm probably going to have a separate video talking about the different types of races that exist in my universe, but just keep in mind that the stars, again, are at the very tip top of what peak power is, unless you're D.A.D or unless you're a maker, right? So, excuse me, I thought I was about to burp there. Anywho, gotta keep myself professional. So, let's then kind of move forward a little bit, kind of establish ourselves in the first story that we're going to be talking about, the pathway to Albright. Now, again, I'm not going to be explaining everything that happens in the story. One, because we'll be here all day. And two, I can't necessarily do that because I don't have everything written down yet. I have a beginning. I have somewhat of a middle, somewhat of an end. I'm still working on it, right? So here's the basic synopsis of it. Pathway to Albright is a story that focuses on Ashley Albright. Ashley Albright, and you guys must be wondering, who is this Albright? So that's a whole nother story, because technically she is the daughter of Balrog. And people are like, whoa, when did he have a kid? And it's like, just stick with me for a little bit. Again, I can't explain everything, but just hold off. So essentially, Ashley Albright is going to a ranger school to learn how to be a ranger. And essentially why rangers exist in this universe is because there is a raging, infectious, like just seething compound known as the black tide. I had mentioned that a couple of minutes ago, and the black tide is essentially this like a amalgamous like black gush, like disgustingness that infects people and turns them into rabid, like rage-filled monsters and whatnot. And so she is going to school to learn how to become a ranger, not only to fight off and learn how to fight off and where the black tide came from, but also she is looking for her sister, who is Evelyn Albright. Evelyn Albright went to the school for the same exact reason, but she figured out that the black tide actually came from a source that is connected to her and Ashley. Again, I'm going to explain that in a minute, but essentially when she figured that out, she essentially went missing and went MIA basically. She's doing this to essentially not only hide from her mother, but also hide from the stars and whatnot, because she's trying to plan for something that's going to happen in the near future. Sorry if you guys hear noise back there. I think my roommate's in the bathroom, but just focus on Papa Afro's voice. All right, listen to me. But basically, Ashley is going to the school to not only figure out what the black tide is, but also try to find her sister. Along the way, she meets allies and whatnot. She meets her childhood friend known as Zook Resbones. Zook Resbones is a leatherback. Yeah, told you that they're still around. So he's a leatherback in secret, though. He wants to keep his identity a secret. That way nobody berates and badgers him about whatnot. Because meeting a leatherback is a big deal, because they are essentially it's like meeting a person who was created by an angel, right? Obviously we're all created by angels. God gave us these bodies, in His perfect image and whatnot. But that it's it was created. They were created by D.A.D themselves, So it's like, holy cow, it's a leatherback. Leatherbacks are, these beings of such great immaculate power and feats and whatnot. So, he's important to the story, and he and her go way back. They met when they were younger and whatnot, and, they, obviously they become love interests, later on, but that's later on. So that's him. The reason why he is going to the ranger school is because his family was unfortunately overtaken by the black tide, and he essentially had to put them down. So he's going there to learn how to fight off the black tide, learn what it is as well, and at least kind of get a cathartic memento to say I at least can stop it from spreading to anyone else, right? So that's Zook. Then there is a character named Mort Morgescu. As you can tell, he's Death. He's not exactly Death, but he is Death in name. He looks like he's this giant hulking figure that has a skull for a face and fights with two sides and whatnot. It's pretty cool. Again, you guys are gonna see pictures of what he looks like later on when I post it to my Insta. And then there's Ellie. Ellie was the counselor at the Ranger Academy, and Mort and Ellie knew Evelyn and want to help Ashley on this journey to try to figure out where Evelyn went as well. So again, I have some things figuring it out on the middle part and where the ground basis is. They are being tracked by this gang known as the Black Leg Gang, and they're essentially a group of people, who were hired by Tatiana. Who's Alex? Who's Tatiana? Tatiana Albright is Ashley and Evelyn's mom. Again, why is she looking for them? Aren't they her daughters? What's going on? But I'm gonna get to that. Just wait patiently. But at the later half, at the end of the story, Ashley finds Evelyn, and they team up along with Zook and Ellie and Mortisque. They find Tatiana and they have a fight and whatnot. And unfortunately, it's too late because they, this essentially culminates to the beginning of the extreme days. Everything else kind of takes so like I started this off wrong. The pathway to Albright is essentially the culmination of what the extreme days are going to be. These two these two other stories kind of take place in the middle and the beginning. So, that's pathway to Albright. Let's talk about Doghead. Alex, Afro, what is Doghead? I'm glad you asked. So, you know how I mentioned a couple of minutes back the Nephilim? There's a couple of stragglers in Nephilim. I know. Wow. A species that we thought was extinct isn't actually extinct. Last of their kind trope. I know. But hear me out. Stick with me, okay? So, Doghead is essentially a story about a dog-headed woman named Abigail da Vinci. Is she Italian? No, but her husband is. So, again, stick with me right quick. So, this story focuses on Abigail da Vinci, her and her husband, who is a turtle. I know this. Please stick with me. So, Dante, his name is Dante, and he's a turtle who wields a three-sectioned, not like a three-section staff, like, it's like, it's like a three-section staff, but it's like it's a three-section nunchuck. So here's a way I can explain it. So here's the middle ring right here, right? And you know how a nunchuck is, like you have the one, it's connected by a chain. There's a third one down in the middle. So boom, bam, bat. So it's like a three-way nunchuck, so he can like do different types of nunchucks tricks with it. You can flip it. The middle ring actually sticks his hand in there. It acts like a shield and whatnot. And it can also turn into a staff. So, I know you guys are going to be like, oh, that sounds like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yes, I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Sue me. But anywho, it focuses on those two. They are essentially about to get married, right? Unfortunately, their marriage is crashed and is bombarded by a bunch of, these, essentially these rabid, like, monsters that were created by the stars. I don't have a name for them yet. I'm just going to call them the Star Raiders. Star Raiders are essentially these wild mutts that were created by the stars as like little scouts and whatnot. So it's overrun by that. And, along the way, Abigail and Dante essentially get split up. Abigail meets a hooded figure and, at first she sees a man fall from the sky. It's an older man who falls from the sky and, it's like a little crater, right? And, obviously with her being a warrior monk, she comes to his aid and, basically the old man tells her that there's a hooded figure after him and that he is not to be trusted. They later encounter the hooded figure, and the hooded figure tells her to stay away from that little imp because that imp is a star. So your fights ensue, but that hooded figure is going to come back later on in the story as another one of my favorite characters that I made, and he's basically based off of my father. But essentially fights happen, tragedy ensues. Dante is killed. Stick with me. He's killed. He's dead, guys. He's super dead. He's super duper dead. Essentially, the old man is known as Beowulf. Beowulf is a star or a proxy star of another star who is also really important. but that star is also a proxy star. So, so where we're at now is Dante's out of commission. Abigail is heartbroken because her hubby's dead, and she figures out that it wasn't accidental, that this was planned. Again, I'm not going to be able to explain everything. Just later on in the story, she meets the hooded figure again, and this hooded figure is also a leatherback. This hooded figure is known as Busara Zumani. And she and him work together, and she kind of trains underneath him a little bit. He teaches her how to master her, star abilities, because again, I'm going to explain this in a minute. She has the abilities of a star. She is a star. She's part star. She doesn't want to be a star because she has been told throughout her entire life that stars are these monstrous beings that just don't know anything but death and destruction and throw nothing but chaos through the wind, right? So later on in the story, she figures out that the one who caused her wedding to be ruined and her husband to die was her aunt, Delilah. Delilah is going to be important when I get to her section in a little bit, but yes, Delilah basically sent a hit out for her to have her die, and she is heartbroken by this and also very angry because you ruined her wedding, her happiest day. So a lot of fights happen, a lot of story happens. Again, this is just a basic interlude about what these characters are and whatnot. We meet a giant pig man named Jonathan Sinbad, who has the ability to morph his body into different types of, think of The Thing from John Carpenter's horror movie, The Thing. Think of that, but cooler. John Carpenter's The Thing is a cool movie, but it's like that. He has the ability to tear his body apart, body horror and whatnot, and he's able to transform his hands into different claws and stuff like that. So he's a major player in the story. And I have a couple of other characters. I'm still kind of working on them and how they're going to work. But Abigail confronts Delilah. They have a big showdown on top of the Quailof tree. And the Quailof tree was actually made by Delilah because, how to explain this in a way that won't hit me with the yellow dollar sign. Delilah wanted to be a mom. She likes being a mom. If you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm saying, right? She had kids beforehand, and those kids are kind of up and gone, but she wants to be a mom again. She really wants to be a mom again. So I'm saying this in a way to where I want to keep myself professional, but that's kind of what her motive is. So as I mentioned, Nephilim existed beforehand, right? This is focusing on Delilah right quick, right? So Delilah was the sister of Minerva, and Minerva was also was a Nephilim princess and was the daughter of King David. King David also, as well, was a dog-headed person. So the Nephilim existed in a separate village, and everyone, and I mean every male Nephilim that existed in that village, were head over heels for Delilah. They admired her. They saw how voluptuous she was. She is a very lust-filled character. I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my goodness, Alex Afro, this is, ooh. Oh, clutched by pearls. Oh, she has big tits and childbearing hips. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I love me some big booties and I love me some big titties. Sue me. You know what I'm saying? But, focus on Delilah right quick. Delilah, she did not like any of that. She saw no attraction to any of the males that were in the village because she didn't feel anything. She felt numb. She felt nothing. There was nothing there. They all did the same thing for her. They bought her expensive gifts. They took her out to expensive dinners. It was all boring to her. But then one day a portal opened, and stepped out was none other than the judge of war himself, Samael. Samael's presence shook throughout the village. Everyone, saw him. They knew he meant business. He walked through that portal. He had the biggest smile on his face, and he said he only wanted one thing. He wanted a dinner. He was just hungry. He was bored, and he just decided, you know what? I'm hungry, and I want some food. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. It's like, Afro, how come how come there's such a catastrophic event that's known as the extreme days, but the stars just kind of come in every time they want to? Yes, the stars, there is every few millennia, there is the event known as the extreme days. However, the top ranked stars are the only ones who have the abilities to come to wherever they want. So you can be a star, but if there's a star above you, you're not allowed to interact with any sort of plane or existence unless they tell you to. Now, if you were a high-ranking star, or if you were able to overthrow and absorb the powers of that star, then you can make that decision. But since Samael was one of the 3 judges, he decided to say, you know what, I'm just going to mess around with some Nephilim right quick, because one, the Nephilim kind of serve their purpose, and they don't really belong here anymore, and they're not listening to us anymore, so I'm going to put them in their place. And B, because I'm hungry. So Samael essentially goes there, and Delilah sees him, and she feels something. Her heart starts to race more times than not. And it's not just her heart, but it's her head. Her head starts to throb. Her body starts to ache. It starts to feel weak and starts to feel vulnerable. And she likes that. She likes that there's this that Samael is giving off this overwhelming presence, and she wanted more of it. She wanted to feel this feeling. So Samael stays there for a couple of days. It's basically antagonizing the Nephilim group, and Delilah is trying to find every way that she can to kind of get closer to Samael. So, funniness ensues. Samael rips off a face of a Nephilim to prove a point that they are nothing to him and that they are nothing more but ants. But King David kind of tells all of his guards to settle down, and that we'll make him the dinner. So later on in the story, Delilah finds Samael Samael figures out that Delilah kind of is stalking him basically, and he uses this to his advantage to kind of see how far she was willing to go to prove just to kind of test her and kind of mess with her a little bit. So Samael finds a random Nephilim girl, and he essentially starts to playfully flirt with her and whatnot, and Delilah does not take this lightly. As soon as Samael leaves, Delilah, and now mind you, she kind of dresses up as as one of the locals in the town, that way no one's able to find her and whatnot. But essentially, she sneak attacks her, brings her to an alleyway, and beats her so badly that she's just unrecognizable. And obviously the Nephilim girl goes home crying, and she's like, I don't know what I did to deserve this. It's sad, but at the same time, Samael is like, okay, I see some great potential in her. I didn't think you were like that. So later on, obviously, there's a lot of tension in the family. Minerva has a husband, and this husband is known as Adam, Prince Adam, not Prince Adam, I guess General Adam. He was one of the general knights of King David's army. Adam and Minerva have a child, and that child is Abigail. Abigail is a nice little baby. Um, Obviously, Delilah is not thrilled about this because with her being the oldest, the older sister, it's expected that she should have had a child by now, but it's just none of the Nephilim men were able to satiate her. So she didn't really care for Abigail too much, and in fact, she like insulted. Like think of Scar from The Lion King. Like she did not mess with her child with her niece. She hated her, and was also jealous of her sister. Abigail, Delilah and Minerva kind of butted heads. Obviously, Minerva figured out that Delilah has a thing for Samael, and essentially, trying to be a good sister is like, don't, no, please. Like, he is a star. He will hurt you. He will, no, he does not care about you. He only, cares about the fact that he can do this to you and whatnot. And Delilah's not hearing it, but she felt that feeling and she wants to feel it again. So later on in the story, her and Delilah and King David get into a bit of a bickering. It's like, oh, I see you, making googly eyes at that star. I will not have my daughter be looking at that star like that. Yada yada yada. Melodrama, TLC drama, stuff like that. Obviously, they get into a screaming match, and Delilah leaves and goes to her room. Samael uses this as a perfect opportune time to kind of really just dig deep into her little Nephilim skull and just really just groom her into the woman she is today. So, Delilah frightened about the fact that the one person that makes her feel the Zenki feeling is just standing on, not standing, laying on her bed, kind of waiting for her. She's nervous, but she's also really excited. She's stammering over her words and whatnot. And Samael, just calms her down and kind of sits her down on the bed and says, I heard that you were having a little bit of trouble with old daddy downstairs. And I know you're having trouble with your sister, but you're better than that. You don't need them. You're the oldest sister, and that old man thinks he could just sit on his throne and bully you like that? You're a grown woman. And obviously, Delilah being head over heels for Samael, I was like, yes, I am. And Samael is telling her what she wants to hear, because it wasn't like Delilah was a good person anyways. She was a narcissistic, egotistical woman. She did it because she knew that Samael was stronger than her, so she wanted that. She knew that none of the men could ever satiate her because they were never on the same level as she was. So it wasn't like she was a good girl turned bad. She was an awful person turned to an even worse person thanks to Samael. Samael saw her and was like, I'm going to make you so much worse. So with a little bit of convincing and whatnot, he essentially tells her, I will give you everything you want. I will give you everything that you desire. Sit from the highest of chalices. Sit on the tallest of thrones. I will even make you a mother. And from that, she, obviously the bed was kind of soaked, but that's all that she needed to hear. And she's like, yes, anything. I'll do anything. And he said, anything? Get rid of them. And she's like, get rid of who? Get rid of them. And she knew what he was talking about. So essentially that night, Samael took Delilah back with him, and everyone kind of lost their mind. It was like, oh my God, the star took the king's daughter. Oh, what was us? Oh no, and whatnot. She's probably getting eaten and whatnot. And a week passes, and Delilah comes back, but Delilah looks different. She looks more aggressive. She looks a lot more like she looks so like her eyes look soulless. She has no expression. So, she destroys the village that she once called home. And in the waking moment of this, Minerva and Adam grab Abigail and try to take her out of the village. Delilah catches up with them, though. And essentially, this is kind of the turning point to where it explains why Abigail is able to turn into a star. So I had mentioned in my last videos that a star, like a person, can turn into a star in multiple different ways. They can be chosen to be a star. They can stab themselves with a star shard. They can, be shot by a Cinderella spark, which technically isn't a star, but again, I talked about this in my last video, but in this, there's another way that you can. If you are related to a star and there is an open wound on your body and a blood of a star falls in there, your blood will transfuse into the blood of the star. So essentially that's what happened in the scuffle. General Adam was able to slice Delilah, because keep in mind, Delilah wasn't at her full star power yet. She was given a fraction of the power to kind of see what she was going to do with it by Samael. So she just has this big open gash wound on her, and obviously Delilah did not take kindly to this and killed Adam. She turned her gaze to Minerva, and before she did anything, Abigail fell on top of her, got on top of her and essentially bit her shoulder, and was kind of throwing a scuffle. And then Delilah grabbed her, and in the scuffle, she also kind of cut Abigail. So then Minerva saw all of this, and was just in the biggest rage and just tackled both of them out of the building to try to get Abigail away from Delilah. But the open scars on both of them kind of collided, and let's just say that she had the scar. Abigail had the scar, open wound on her hand. It touched the open wound that was on Delilah, and some of her blood seeped into hers. So that kind of explains moderately. I know it's kind of I know people are going to say, oh, that's a cheap cop out. You're going to have cheap cop outs in the story, but that just kind of explains it. It makes sense to me. So that explains why Abigail has the ability to tap into the powers of a star. It's because of that incident. And obviously it shows that she has a bit of anger issues. She's very easily she's easy to anger. She's prone to anger and whatnot. And that's, not only because of the trauma that she went through, but it's also because that there's just this raging beast inside her because of the trauma. But it's also her star form trying to manifest itself inside of her. So in the scuffle, Delilah kills Minerva, and she grabs Abigail, and she says some things that I'm not going to repeat here, but throws her off a cliff, and Abigail busts her head open into the water, and she floats down a river. Delilah doesn't go through with it because she assumes that she's dead. There's no way that a child can live through that. So her job was done, and she goes back to the portal. Samael's waiting for her, slowly clapping with the biggest, stupidest smile on his face. And this is in the middle of the village that's burning down all around them. Bodies are laid across, and in the comedic scene, in a comedic sense, he kind of rips off a finger of Nephilim, takes it off, and it's kind of dark, but it's also kind of funny. He rips off the ring that was on the finger and gives it to Delilah. Basically, he's proposing to her. Aw, how cute, you know. But that's just kind of the story of how Delilah came to be and how she came to power. Now, Delilah technically isn't a star, but she is more of a proxy star. Now, again, I had mentioned this back in my legend video, that a proxy star is just a star, or it's just someone who's chosen by a star. Like, they're given the powers of a star and whatnot. They're not as powerful as their master, but they are just as strong and, you know, have the abilities of a star, right? So that's Delilah. Again, as I mentioned in the Doghead story, Abigail and Delilah get into, you know, they have their fight, and, you know, Abigail taps into her, like, I guess you could say pseudo star form. It's not her true star form. It's just like, it's her rage mode. She taps into that and she's able to overcome and beat Delilah. And as Delilah lays on her knees, she says, "Am I beautiful now?" And you know, just imagine like the fight beforehand. Abigail and Delilah kind of clashed mouths, like they were biting each other on the mouth. It looks like they were kissing, but they were like biting each other's mouths. And then like Abigail rips like the mouth section off of Delilah. So it's kind of a, you know, it's kind of a messed up like joke in there, like, am I still pretty? And like, you know, she's basically concussed and beaten senseless. So she's not like all the way there. But she says, "Am I pretty now?" And Abigail looks at her and is like, "You've always been ugly, both on the inside and the out." And, you know, she has like the Wolverine claw that's able to, like in the story, she has like bladed weapons and like bladed chains and whatnot. So, you know, it shoots out like a Wolverine claw, and she's able to use that as like a blade weapon. So she slices Abigail, and her head fully detaches. You know, her fingers come off too, but like her neck and her head detaches from her body. She's decapitated. Delilah is slain. And that is mostly the story, how it concludes with, you know, Doghead and whatnot. Again, I say like it's a timeline. It's not necessarily a timeline. It's just, you know, if I had to say, it focuses more or less in the like earlier parts before the Extreme Days event, or at least it's around where the Extreme Days events happen. There's not exactly a timeline yet. I am building one, but just know that the Extreme Days is just the big like crossover event between all the three series and whatnot. So that's Pathway to Albright, and that's, you know, Doghead. So now let's talk about X-Pros, or the Extermination Professionals. Again, this is probably the one that has the least amount of writing technically in it, but it does have a beginning, somewhat of a middle, and somewhat of an end. But the Extermination Professionals, think of them as like the Suicide Squad. They were hired by a shadow organization it's like the Black Mamba. I have notes. Again, I am going off script and I'm going out telling you guys what's inside my head. But they are hired by the Black Mamba to do different types of bounties and whatnot. Let's talk about the characters that make up the Extermination Professionals. Let's talk about Hector. Hector Alejandro is a snail that speaks Spanish. I know that sounds so stupid, but please stick with me. So Hector actually has connections to Evelyn, because they met back in high school before Evelyn went off to the Ranger Academy. And they were essentially lovey-dovey and whatnot. So they have a history together. And he's essentially doing this to try to see if he could find any bounties that are related to Evelyn. Not necessarily to try to kill her, but try to find her, because he's just been looking for her. And like, you know, this shadow organization has information on not most, but basically everyone. So he's doing that to try to find her. and try to see what's going on, because he realizes that she went MIA and has just been looking for her ever since. And now we're going to be looking at the California twins, Danny California and Lex California. Danny California, if you guys know, alternative rock is reference to the Red Hot Chili Pepper song Danny California. Her full name is Daniela, but I like the name Danny because, you know, it's cool, it's cute, it's unique. So she is an imp, and so is her brother, obviously. And they have these weapons that they are able to spawn from their hands. Their weapons, her weapon is essentially a ballistic yo-yo, I guess you can say. It has, you know, it acts like a yo-yo, except like, you know, she throws it against the wall and it explodes, right? Lex has, you know, a baseball bat that does the exact same thing. They can also spawn firearms. So Danny has mostly a shotgun, while Lex has a Remington revolver, right? So, you know, that's them. There's not a lot story and a lot of, well, I take that back. Most of the story focuses on Lex, with, you know, his conflicts and whatnot. They essentially joined the team as a way to kind of pay off their debt at the Hotel California. Hotel Cal. I don't know why I had a brain fart there. It's their last names. But Hotel California was a business that their father had owned, and guess what? It was a hotel, but it was also a gambling site, and it was just exposed for a lot of fraud, and was basically filed for bankruptcy, and now they're trying to pay off the property and whatnot. So that's why they joined this shadow organization. It could have been literally anything else, but they were like, we get to kill things and we get paid for it, so why not? So, you know, that's Lex and Danny. Danny is also has a little bit of a partner, and his name is Homer Uno. Homer Uno is a karate master Cyclops. I know you guys are looking at me with the biggest of eyebrows, but please just stick with me. So he was a monk who lived in the mountains, and he was an extraordinary fighter. People praised him. People called him Tyr, the god of war. Now, you know, Tyr in Norse mythology isn't like a normal god of war. He was more of a figure out how to avoid war. And not to say that, you know, Homer was a pacifist, but he would try everything in his power to try to not get into fights and whatnot. He was more of a, you know, a more zen, but he will still rock your stuff if, you know, you ever stepped on a line. But that's Homer. Homer and Danny met up because Danny was running away from, you know, the debt collectors, I guess you would say, and she was critically injured, and Homer had found her and took her back to the temple. You know, a lot of the masters did not agree to why he was doing that, but he said, you know, please just allow me, as soon as she gets back to health, I'll let her leave, but she has a hole, she's been shot, it's going to take her some time. And they were like, we'll allow it. We respect you as a master at your rank. The grandmasters respect him because he was at a master rank and he was going to become a grandmaster. So, Homer takes care of Danny. Danny has a little bit of a crush on Uno, and Uno, Homer, he first doesn't really reciprocate it because obviously he's a monk. His lifestyle is of the monks. Monks are more celibate and whatnot. But one night he just kind of felt an urge because Danny was, she was asleep, but she didn't again, this is going to get a little more raunchy, but she slept topless. And this was the first time that Homer has ever seen a pair of breasts. And he had left the room and he didn't know what to do. So essentially, time goes on, they grow familiar with each other, and they bond together and whatnot. But then Homer kind of expresses his feelings towards Danny. Danny obviously, sees that, and she's like, I know. And like they they kiss, you know, if you know, you know. They do a little, you know, smooching and whatnot. You know, things get a little more romantical, and obviously, the next day, Homer feels something. He feels strong. He feels so much stronger. He feels better. He feels rejuvenated. He feels so much stronger than he ever has before, and he realizes that, you know, due to his celibacy, he realized that was holding him back. So every now and then, him and Danny would kind of kiss, and that's what would kind of get him more pumped up and a lot more stronger, and thus makes him a better fighter, and thus makes him grow at the ranks of Grandmaster. Danny also being the rambunctious girl that she is, you know, with Homer being trying to be a good boy and everything, Danny kind of wanted to crack him down a little bit. You know, she took him out to town, kind of snuck him out and whatnot, and you know, Homer kind of saw just how much there's more to what to life is than being a monk. So that's kind of their story. Obviously, um, you know, the Grandmasters catch him, and he says, you know, if you kick her out, I'll leave as well. And he leaves. So he leaves the life of a monk behind, and him and Danny join the Shadow organization because, you know, she was able to get back in touch with her brother, and her brother kind of got her and him the job offer to join the extermination professionals. So that's kind of the background and the story of the characters that kind of make up the team. There is also another character that we're going to be focusing on a little bit, and he is honestly one of the most important characters to ever exist in this entire universe. And that character is Coco Jumbo. Coco Jumbo, or Baku Jambe, is easily one of my favorite characters that I've ever written, and you're going to figure out why in just a minute. So Baku Jambe is a leatherback. Ooh, big shock, I know. You know, he's a celebrity basically, right? So Baku Jambe was a leatherback chieftain. He was a respected leatherback chieftain, and he essentially led a nomadic tribe across the lands, you know, around the time that humanity was still kind of evolving and didn't necessarily need them, but he still was willing to help out humanity if they ever needed, like, protection and whatnot, right? So, unfortunately, tragedy struck. His tribe were eliminated by Balrog and the Star Raiders. He knows that it was Balrog because he recognizes, you know, his aura and the power that he held, you know, and just, you know, his horns, his eyes. He saw his wife, who was pregnant with twin girls. He slayed her, and he had slayed the rest of his tribe. And from that day forward, he had felt nothing but anger and malice towards any kind of star that ever existed, you know, and he hated Balrog with all of his heart. Balrog, you know, and this kind of explains like the situation, what's going on between Tatiana and, you know, Balrog and like everything else. So there's a prequel series I'm also working on that focuses on Zitreus. Zitreus, as we're going to figure out later on, in Pathway to Albright, is actually the grandfather of Zook. Actually, I say that Pathway to Albright. I meant the Extreme Days arc. We figure out that Zitreus is actually the grandfather of Zook. And, you know, essentially there was a prequel series that focused on, you know, before like anything that happened here, it focused on the Leatherbacks and they're kind of reigning in and trying their best to defend humanity and whatnot. There was a Fireborn named Megara, and there was a Frostborn named Gyaucho. They loved each other very much, kith, you know, and the influence came over Megara. Excuse me, it's Megara. So there was a voice in her head calling to her, and you know, she wanted to become more than just what she was originally. Again, I'm still working on the story, but it's essentially a prequel story that focused on the younger, like Coco and younger Tatiana. Um, Younger Tatiana, like later on, Megara dies giving birth to Tatiana, and so does Gaucho, unfortunately. So the Leatherbacks take Tatiana in and raise her as one of their own. Coco's introduced, so is his wife. So young Coco and Tatiana, they become friends. They become really good friends and whatnot. And so, but then, as I mentioned earlier, Balrog came and slayed his tribe and gets with Tatiana. So Coco kind of holds on to this grudge for the next couple of years, next 26 years, give or take. And I say 26 because it's around this time where Evelyn is born. It's not exact, again, I don't have the exact timeline yet, but just think later on, Tatiana is impregnated forcefully, unfortunately, by Balrog, and she gives birth to Evelyn. Evelyn is waiting in the hospital room. She is undefended. Of course, it's on a militaristic base and whatnot. Coco finds his way in. Coco goes to the delivery room, and he finds a sleeping Evelyn. He looks at her with nothing in his eyes. There's nothing but anger and hate and malice behind those eyes. And he picks, he essentially gets his hands around Evelyn's neck, and he closes his hands, squeezing around the baby's neck. But then something inside him ticks. He says, "What am I doing?" He slowly lets go of the baby's neck. He didn't hurt her, but it woke up the baby. The baby starts crying. He takes a step back and he realizes that he was about to kill a baby. This baby, who has done nothing, who has not caused a harm, not even to a fly, has done nothing but just slept peacefully. He was about to take a baby's life. And he hears the cries of the child, and it brings him back to where, he heard one of the babies crying in the village when he had, his tribe and whatnot. So he picks up Evelyn and he holds her in his arms, and he hushes it and he says, "I'm sorry." Realizing the consequences of his actions, he comforts Evelyn, and Evelyn reaches out her hand, her little tiny baby hand, and Coco puts his finger next to hers, and she slowly puts her finger around it. And Coco, still not necessarily like later on, he does come around to it, but he realizes that this isn't right, So he puts the baby back into the bin, and he confronts Tatiana about it. He says, "I almost killed your child, but I'm not going to, because she hasn't done anything yet. However, I'm going to make a deal with you." And they essentially kind of go over, the ramifications and whatnot. Tati obviously isn't really happy about Coco almost killing her child, but she says, "You know what? I'm going to give you this. I'll let you keep an eye on our child, because we have more important things to focus on." Obviously, Tatiana's not the best mom, but this kind of gives Coco a chance to not only keep an eye on the kids, but also kind of bond with her. So Coco, spends some time with Evie and kind of, sees her, not as a daughter yet, but just kind of it mostly starts off as I'm gonna keep an eye on you. If you ever step out of line, I will break your neck. And keep in mind that Evie's just drawing in her little notebook. And it's this is you. Coco's "I know who you're gonna turn out to be." But then later on, again, forcefully, Balrog impregnates Tatiana again, and she gives birth to Ashley. Again, this kind of goes back around to Ashley and Evelyn, their relationship as sisters, obviously. But this kind of puts things in perspective for Balrog. Balrog was going to have 2 kids. And, he just feels something in his heart. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't want to call it love because he doesn't feel love towards these girls. But at the same time, he has this innate paternal instinct to protect them because they are just kids. They haven't done anything to harm anyone. They're just kids, and they're kids that aren't even able to grow up normal lives. They have this, title over their shoulders as being the children of Balrog and Tatiana and whatnot, right? So they already have big targets on their backs. So Coco does everything in his power to protect the girls. Obviously, as the girls grow, they kind of get more closer to Coco. Coco is still kind of, a little put off by this, but he still doesn't want to push the girls away because, technically he is all that they got. So, Daddy obviously isn't around, Mama isn't obviously around, so they kind of latch themselves to Coco. Tatiana doesn't really like this all too much. In fact, it got to a point to where she starts to physically abuse them, to remind them that Coco will never be their true father, that their true father is Balrog. And, Coco is not pleased by this, and she even confronts him and says, "You don't even care about the girls. Why does this matter to you?" And it's like, they're girls. They are children. You should not beat them like that. Maybe if you were around to actually be a mom, but it just goes in one ear, out the other through Tatiana because she thinks that it's more important to become a star rather than be a mom. So as time goes on, it boils down to a point to where Coco says, "I'm sick of this." So, not to the girls, but he realizes that the girls aren't going to grow up in a normal environment. They're surrounded 24/7 by surveillance. They can't grow up like this. So Coco kidnaps them. He takes them far away from the land that they grew up in. And, he takes them down to a lodge that he built nearby the base. I say nearby, but it was like in the mountains somewhere, off the grid, right? So, Coco and the girls still kind of grow up a little bit, grow a little bit closer to one another. And there's a thing that's coming up at the school that they, Coco got them into and got them attending, that it was Father's Festival, yeah, or not, I say Father's Festival, but it was like, a parental, like, bring your mom, bring your dad, bring whatever, that way the orphans there are like, "Oh, I don't have mom and dad." But, the girls kind of see this as an opportunity to kind of, because at this point, the girls, they want to call him dad. They have no other option. They don't have a dad. Coco is the only male paternal figure that's in their lives, and they, it isn't easy. But one night before Coco tucks them into bed, it's Ashley who asked the question. Evelyn was a little more nervous, so Ashley, being more of the tomboyish, more confident one, she kind of nervously asked Coco, could you be our dad? And Coco is, he's taken aback by this. He says, I can't. I can never be your father. I spend time with you girls, and I take you to school, and I feed y'all, and I house y'all, but I can never be your father. I'm sorry. And this hurts the girls. This hurts them. They get tears in their eyes, and they're like, I guess we'll never have a dad. And they try to go to bed, and Coco is also taken a step back by this because he realizes that they don't really have anyone else. So Coco, he rewinds it a bit. He grabs Ashley and he grabs Evelyn, and he asks them very. I had this saved in my notes. Let me try to see if I can remember it. He asked them 3 important questions. Do you wish to call me dad? The girls say yes. Do you want me to be your dad? And they say yes. Would it be okay if I was your dad? That's kind of the rough translation of how I remember it, but they also say yes. So Coco says, then I'll be your father. And the girls are excited. They're like, yay, we have a dad. Yeah. And, obviously with kids and whatnot, they always try to simplify things. And they're like, yay. They don't know what a dad means, but, to Coco, this is kind of like a nice little gate opening for him. He realizes that the girls are kind of another chance for him, and in a weird way, he does see them as surrogate daughters, but he's not willing to open up that much yet. So, the parent festival, I'm still thinking of a name, but they go there, they have fun, yada, 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 oh, happiness ensues. He brings them back, and, when Ashley and Evelyn, or when Coco puts the girls to bed, Evelyn, before she lays down, she gives Coco a big, big hug, and she whispers in her ear, thank you for being our dad. And Coco, his heart breaks because, well, not breaks, but his heart starts to thump. He feels it. He now knows that he has to protect these girls, not only because they're just kids, but they're his daughters. And he says, of course, baby, of course. And obviously he has tears in his eyes because the girls don't know the actions that their father did to him, but he feels like it's not right to put that kind of information onto them. So he keeps them far away from that. But, he kisses the girls on the foreheads goodnight, and Coco goes out of the room and he starts to cry. He bawls because, what the fact of the matter is that no matter what, it doesn't necessarily have to be by blood or anything. A father doesn't have to be related to anyone. A father is someone who should be there for someone who needs guidance, who needs help, who needs just a reminder that everything is going to be okay. So, later on in the story, obviously, the girls and Coco grow together, and the stories of the extermination professionals. He comes across them, and they've Coco has the bounty to find Evelyn, and they go after him because they just want the bigger bounty. But this is still kind of rough right now, but let me focus on Coco right quick, because I feel like Coco is probably not only one of the most important characters I have written in the D.A.D universe, but I feel like he's one of the most important characters that have resonated with me. Now, obviously, Cinderella Man was one of my more aha characters, with the Cinderella song by Eminem and whatnot. Coco is one of those characters that I think about, and it makes me tear up, because it's the idea of a man who lost everything, but he still found resolve, because as awful as it is to say, he had every right to kill Ashley and Evelyn, because just as Balrog took his family away, Coco can take his family away. But he realizes that that's not right. That's not the right thing to do. And, and in a way, technically, Coco does take Balrog's kids away, but not in a way that Balrog did. Coco did it out of love. He did it out of providing them a home, providing them with nurturing and protection. And, it's really hard to explain, but Coco, if there's any character that I do hope will make an impact on people, it's Coco. I feel like a lot of people can look to him not only as a male role, like as a positive male role model, but also a, positive, role model in general. Because, Coco represents someone who, family isn't tied by blood. Family is tied by bond. And especially in the case of Ashley and Evelyn, Coco didn't care if they were leatherbacks, gargoyles, or even dragons. Those were his girls. And he was going to fight tooth and nail for those girls. And it's, I don't really know how I'm able to kind of put this into words that make sense, because I know that a lot of people don't really, not to say everyone, but a lot of people don't have good relationships with their fathers. But I would say that, obviously Busara Zumani is my dad's like little character, OC and whatnot, but Coco probably has more of my dad's DNA in him than any of the other characters I've made, because my father is a man who, who I know he says he never wanted to be a father. He said he'd never be a good father, but he has done such an amazing job, at least in my eyes. He has worked so hard and has done so much for me and my brothers and my sister and my mom. Worked tireless hours, worked his fingers to the bone to make sure that we had a roof over our heads. And to that, I am always thankful for him. And because that's the thing, is that he didn't have to do that, but he did. And I feel like that's kind of why Coco resonates with me so much, is because Coco didn't have to do any of that. He didn't have to be the girl's father, and he could have just left them. He could have killed them and left, but he didn't. He wanted a second chance, and those girls were his second chance. And again, this is really hard to explain, because again, I'm kind of going off of my mind, but Coco is one of my favorite characters that I've ever written narratively, because it essentially establishes why Ashley and Evelyn are who they are. And it's because of Coco's love, Coco's nurturing of the girls. Because if Coco had not been there, they would have just been another pawns in the Star Army and would have been the next heirs to Balrog's throne. So, I know this is kind of taking more of a somber tone, but I just wanted to explain, why Coco is very important to me, because he represents true masculinity. He is someone, forget Andrew Tate, forget Aiden Ross, forget like Sneeko. Those aren't masculine men. Those are pathetic people who scam young men into giving them money to pretend to be men. They're not men. And as I mentioned in my, I haven't mentioned this before, but there's a saying that, I've never heard it before, and I think I came up with it, but, correct me if I'm wrong, but, there is a difference between a king and a father. And that's kind of the story that comes to its like full abrupt when Coco and Balrog kind of have their rematch. Is Coco and Balrog, um, Balrog is a king while Coco is a father. And people are going to be asking, well, what is the differences between a king and a father? A king cares about his title, and a king cares about his kingdom. A king, you know, doesn't care about, you know, what's in front of him, but instead what's around him. A father cares about what's in front of him. A father cares about his family. A father cares and makes sure that his family is okay. You know, obviously that's a simplistic version of it, but it makes sense if you think about it. You know, Coco is a father, while Balrog is a king. He's a tyrannical king. He is an awful person. You know, and they are the not they. He is Ashley and Evelyn's father by blood, but he will never be a father by name. Coco will always be Ashley and Evelyn's true father because he raised them. He protected them. He nurtured them into the women that they are today. And that is why, you know, again, I know this is taking more of a somber note, but I kind of just, you know, because Coco's story is more of a somber one. It's very sad, very heartbreaking, and very bittersweet because at the end of all of it, Coco, spoiler alerts, actually, you know what? I'm going to take a step back because I don't want to ruin it for you guys. But let's just say that everything that Coco does, he does it for his girls. And, you know, that is why he is one of my favorite characters. And I cannot wait to draw out and show the story unfold for you guys and whatnot. And again, this isn't everything that's going to be happening in this story. And I know I left some things out. But again, this is kind of just the base foundation of what I am building. Again, like I said in my last videos, I can't explain everything, but I may make myself a couple of separate parts focusing on the different species that make up this universe and all the other universes and whatnot. I may go into depth and more detail about certain characters. And there's also going to be a mini series. I'm here to announce that there's going to be a mini series focusing on creating my creative process of my hero characters and my villain characters. And the, you know, story, you know, obviously I'm still thinking of a name, but I think I have one. It's like for hero characters, it's creating a champion, and for my villains, it's building a bastard. So, you know, keep an eye out for those. I'm not sure when I'm going to be posting those, but think of this as kind of a semi-conclusion to what my universe is, or at least what makes up my universes. Obviously, this isn't going to be my last video. I have so many more videos that I have on hand and are ready to tell you guys, but we're kind of reaching almost an hour and 30 minutes now. Holy cow. But, you know, essentially, I just wanted to take this time to say thank you again. I know I have said thank you earlier, but I want to say thank you again because, you know, I think I've gotten to a point to where I want people to hear my story. And again, it's small, but it's more than what people will see. You know, it's much more than what Marvel has to offer, much more than what DC has to offer. And I think that, you know, I'm going to make it big. And not only because I believe in myself, but I have people who believe in me. And I'm not going to let those people down. You know, so that's, you know, that's all I really have to say. Again, I'm sorry for another long video, but I just kind of want to put this out there. Again, I'm kind of just going off the top of my noggin, and it isn't exactly scripted, and I'm going to kind of keep it like that. I may, like, when I'm talking about, like, you know, my building a bastard or creating a champion series, I may have some notes that I'm going to have written down. But you know, again, I may just do it at the top of my head because I've done well with it so far. So, you know, I just want to say thank you all so much for your time. And this has been AfroMandias. And y'all stay fresh and stay frosty. I'll see y'all next time.